This is Seasons of Discontent with your hosts Rick Snyder and Matt Combs.
Welcome to Seasons of Discontent, Season 9, Episode 19, brought to you by Rick Snyder's Washington. And I'm Rick Snyder.
I'm Matt.
And we're back discussing all things Washington sports and life as part of my mighty Rick Snyder's network. So anyway, Matt, they could have been contenders again, screwed it up, and they lost to Seattle. Decent game, lot to like, but man, they just can't close out wins. They let the other team go 5 plays, like 48 yards, kick a field goal. How many of those were on Sunday? Like 4 games ending in field goals?
Yeah.
It was crazy. And once again, they blew it. They could have been 5-5 and then maybe beat the Giants. Maybe you got a shot, at that wild card. And now it's just gone.
I'm not one for conspiracy theories, but this is 2 weeks in a row. There's been BS calls by the referees. It's just, I just have to tell Roger Goodell in the NFL, Dan Snyder's gone and they're not called the Redskins anymore. Can we get a break? But Rick, realistically, that's what 3, probably 4 games that they should have won. You can count one of those Eagles games, the one that went to OT, the Bears game, the Giants game, and now this game. Those were all winnable games, and 2 of them they let go at the end of the game. The other 2, they just were completely outmatched and unprepared. It's kind of the tale of Ron Rivera's tenure here in Washington. It's just mediocrity. And I'll be honest with you, I don't see any change in the defense without Sweat and Chase Young. I mean, you had 2 high draft picks, first round picks. Those were your 2 sack leaders. Yeah, they're not getting the sacks, but they weren't getting a lot of sacks when those guys were here, so I don't know what is going on. I do know that Sam Howell is definitely a top 10 quarterback and a franchise quarterback for this team. They have found their quarterback. You have to somehow figure out a way to convince the next head coach that he is the starter of this team.
Yeah, on my column for 1067 The Fan, Odyssey.com today, I wrote that I ranked all the quarterbacks since the last Super Bowl, including Rippon. 35 guys have started for this team. And I moved Howell up to number 4. I mean, I gave Rip the 1 because I probably shouldn't have, but I gave Rip the 1. He had a Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
With this since the Super Bowl, he only had a year or so after that. Brad Johnson was 2. He had to win his Super Bowl in Tampa because Dan got rid of him. Kirk Cousins was 3. He was a stats monster, has gone on in Minnesota. And then I put Howell at 4 because, 3 straight 300-yard gains. Only 2 other quarterbacks have ever done that. It's only 11 games in. Now, this speaks to how bad the list is. I mean, there's a lot of failed players on that list, or guys who came here to get paid after they were done, or, or just nobodies, that kind of stuff. But still, this guy's 4, and I'd say if he had a good career, he might end up at 1. I don't know. Out of this group, it's sort of like the lost years of the franchise. But he's definitely, I don't know what more. People say, well, and even Ron ago, he could be. What more do you have to see? This team has had nothing hardly for a generation. And you want to sit here and put provisions on this guy? Just take the gift, take the win, and move on.
Yeah, I will say this. I agree with Howell at 4 on your list. Obviously, Rippon is a king in DC still for that Super Bowl. Brad Johnson probably wouldn't have won a Super Bowl here in DC. Probably could have, but Danny effed that up. Howell is on the heels of Cousins. I'll say that as far as in Washington franchise history. I'm not counting Cousins in Minnesota. Howell is nipping on his heels because if you really think about it, Cousins was a stats monster in the 4th quarter when the game was out of hand. Don't get me wrong, he won, but there were a lot of games where it was, garbage time TDs, garbage time yardage and stuff like that. Kirk's a good quarterback, but Howell's on his heels as far as their Washington franchise time. Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot of names on here didn't even remember. I forgot about Tony Banks and Jeff Hostetler. I remember when they traded from with the Raiders for him. Yeah. Freeze, Todd Collins. I remember the Todd Collins bandwagon. Everybody was on that because he won those last 5 games thanks to the bingo caller.
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
my goodness.
I mean, you've got first round picks here like Schuler, who I made 20th on there. But, you've got Jason Campbell was the only first rounder in recent years I thought was decent.
Mm-hmm.
And there you had Haskins, who didn't work out.
Mm-hmm.
You had Ramsey, who didn't work out. I mean, there was just, wow, that's a lot of blown first round picks on quarterbacks.
I mean, Wentz was a first round pick for another franchise where he had a lot of success. You got Robert, who had that 1 year of lightning in a bottle.
Yeah, 1 year.
Yeah, it was only 1 year. I mean, Heineke's a spot starter. I see you got him at 11.
Yeah.
Rich Gannon, who came here at the end of his career. Rex Grossman, who was, he was Rex Grossman.
His career.
Yeah. I mean, there are some wolves on here.
Yeah. So that's why you're not asking for much. But, people should be grateful that, wow, they got lucky, found a guy. Sort of like Gus. Gus was a 7th rounder, had played for a few years for them. And now you got again. So take the win, quit, moaning about everything.
I think if Sam Howell was a first round draft pick, he would be on all the ESPN shows and talked about nationwide. The fact that he fell to the 5th round is what's hurting him. And it's no fault towards him. I mean, he had a bad season his last year at UNC. He lost both of his running backs. He lost his top wide receiver. I mean, they had a down year. It's not his fault. But if he was a first round draft pick, they would be going nuts about him. I kind of took a couple notes. Aside from the kid out in San Francisco, who to me is a system quarterback who is benefiting from having Christian McCaffrey and Brock Purdy. I'm sorry, I couldn't remember his name. Aside from having Christian McCaffrey and Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk and Trent Williams protecting his blind side, I mean, he's just a regular guy. He's just a regular quarterback, but he's benefited from being in Kyle Shanahan's system, which is very quarterback friendly. Sam Howell has the most yards out of any guy in that draft pick or in that draft class. Kenny Pickett's been starting for 2 seasons, and Sam Howell has more touchdowns in 10 games than Kenny has in his entire career. I mean, they definitely got the best quarterback in the draft. I mean, you could argue Purdy just because of his success, but they definitely lucked into this. And Sanchez kept making a bunch of comments on Sunday about how, he can't see over the line because he's short and da-da-da. Whatever. Mark Sanchez, you're about as good at commentary as you are as an NFL quarterback. I mean, so I guess the question is, obviously they're moving on from Ron. Ron is checked out. Ron knows his time is up. Are we going to stick with Eric Bieniemy, who has pretty much fostered Sam Howell's growth in this system?
Yeah, I don't know if they're going to make a change or not. It's hard to read because it's Josh Harris, and I just don't have the sources around that yet, to be able to figure him out. But if they're going to make a move, let's say they're playing the Giants Sunday. If they lose the Giants game, I don't think you fire him right then because you got to play Dallas in 4 days. That's a lot of chaos. So wait till the Dallas game is over. Then you got 10 days. That's when you make a move. So if it's going to happen, it'll happen then, or an assistant coach will happen then if they throw Del Rio on the fire or whatever. I think that's more of the time. And then, if you give it to Eric Bieniemy, I only say this. Bieniemy, may be their next head coach. I like a lot about Bieniemy. He still needs to work on his play calling. He's got some things to do, but there's a lot of positives. But I think trying to give him this interim title with 6 games to go, and they got to play, I don't know, Miami, San Francisco, Dallas of those 6. Suppose he goes like 1-5. Then everybody, did that screw him? I mean, Ray Rhodes worried about that in 2000 when they fired Norv, and they offered it to Ray Rhodes, and Rhodes 3 games left said, I don't want that on my resume. I'm still trying to head coach somewhere. Coaches very much protect the record. Bieniemy don't want a 1-5 on his mark either. And if they decide we're just cleaning house, hey, go find somewhere else to coach. How's he going to interview for coaching jobs where they go, Oh, so you were 1-5, huh? Well, it's not your fault, I know, but you're 1-5. They still look at that number.
Mhm.
And it's unfair to Eric. If I'm Eric, I say, no, I'm too busy calling plays. Give it to the special teams guy. Something. I don't want it. And I'll talk to you in January about the head job. Conversely, if he does okay, Harris is stuck in a bind about he has to keep him, whether he wants to or not. Maybe he does want to, maybe he doesn't. The last scenario could be he's under contract for next year still. And if he doesn't get a head coaching offer anywhere, maybe you say, I'd like you to stay here and work with Hal another year. But that makes your next head coach have to take an OC maybe he wants or doesn't want. Really complicated scenarios on all this, so.
Well, yeah, and I know you've been kind of championing for the guy in Detroit, Foster. Was it Ben Foster or something? Or Ben Johnson, I think is his name. Yeah, Ben Johnson. I know you've been kind of cheering for him to come in and be the next head coach. That's a guy that's going to bring an offensive system with him. Does he really want to have to blend his system with Bieniemy's? And, I think honestly, the scenario that plays out, I think Ron finishes the whole season. I think Ron will be here, but I do believe he'll be fired on Black Monday. Or it really, realistically, Ron doesn't have to be fired. Isn't his contract up at the end of the season?
No, he has 1 year to go.
Oh, he has 1 year left to go. Okay. Well, so Ron's gone Black Monday. He'll be one of the first coaches axed Sunday night, Monday morning. I really think that Bieniemy, they're going to kind of wait because they have him in the building. They have him under contract. They're going to fire Jason Wright, or he's going to drop out. They're going to fire Marty and Marty. They're going to do a lot of housekeeping when it comes to the football operations part first before they get to the actual coaches. So I think what they're going to do is they're going to bring in a GM. They're going to bring in a VP of football ops, excuse me, to work hand in hand with the GM. And I think the GM is going to sit down and have an honest conversation with Bieniemy, feel him out, see if Bieniemy is a right fit for head coach of this team. And then they go from there. If they don't hire Bieniemy, they'll probably let him out of his contract and let him go be an OC or a head coach somewhere else. So I think that it's basically EB's job to interview for first. I don't think he'll be interim. Like you said, I don't think he wants that on his resume. So I don't think he'll be interim, but it's definitely his job first to interview for.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Now, one thing you said about firing all the guys like Marty and Marty, here's the hard part of that in January. You've just let them spend 5 months scouting everything. And if you fire them now, well, you can go find new scouts, but they don't have the same access and look at things. A lot of times, like the scouts and such, their contracts expire the day after the draft. That way they don't take knowledge to a new team. You spent money, they go elsewhere with it. So I don't know. That's an interesting one because you do want to clean house, but man, you don't want to give up 5 months of stuff, that you
but doing. you know how the NFL works. I mean, if there's an assistant general manager out there that's going to have the chance to be elevated to a GM and they offer him the job, like he can take it, So yeah. I'm sure. Well, look, we know that Harris has hired this analytics guy. I'm sure there's people in his ear that are consulting him as far as what he needs to do with the franchise. He's probably had conversations with Magic and Rails and all the other owners that are involved with the football operations, what they're going to do. He has a roadmap of what he wants to do. So yeah, I think, and realistically, I mean, you can hang on to scouts, but if there's an assistant GM out there that you're going to bring in and promote him to GM, he's got a big board too. They don't just watch their team. They watch other teams around the league. He kind of can get the gist of what need. I mean, the coaches are hired in January, February. They don't have that gives them 2 months to prepare for the draft. I mean, I think that these guys are a little bit more prepared for the next step than we probably know.
Yeah. All right, in our final minute before I cut you off, as everybody now complains on the comments section, I want Matt to talk more. Okay, well, that's fine.
You don't want me to talk more. Trust me.
I'll switch over to the Wizards. Wes Unseld, team is 2-8, and Wes's career here is 72 and 102. And they look awful. They give up like a bazillion points a game. They blew a 23-point lead, Monday. I just think it's time for Wes Unseld to go. I didn't think his father was a very good coach either, but the junior, man, it's just not working here. And unless your goal was to just tank out and win 10 games this year, the NBA, it's easy to do because there's so many games. You can fire somebody early. They do it all the time. I've just been disappointed in the guy. They played zero defense, which means they're not listening to any coach tell them to play zero defense.
So the Wizards brought in a new corporate or management structure over the offseason. Was Wes their coach?
Yeah.
Oh, he was. That was their decision.
Oh, the management guys? Yeah. I mean, Wes had a say in all that. Yeah.
No, I'm saying as we were talking about kind of with the Commanders situation was when they brought in these guys that were I know they came from Oklahoma City together or something like that. When they brought those guys in, was Wes already the coach?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, so he's not their coach, is what I'm kind of getting at. That, yeah, there'll be changes made. I mean, this team plays zero defense. They blow huge leads. They had a big lead the other night, and they lost that lead. Yeah, they're bad. and it doesn't help that you gave Kyle Kuzma all that money in the offseason, and you got rid of Bradley Beal to cut expenses. You got rid of these big money guys to cut expenses so that you could try and sign somebody. They couldn't sign anybody. So I don't know, man. The Wizards are just, I don't know what's going on with them. I mean, it's funny to me, we talked all these years about Dan. Aside from a Stanley Cup, Ted Leonsis doesn't have a good track record, and he wanted the Wizards. That was his primary focus, was buying the Wizards from the Poland family because he was a huge basketball fan, and he's done absolutely nothing with the Wizards, Yeah.
Oh, Leonsis wants betting material. He wants shows. He wants for his TV network. It's like he's doing the same thing Dan did. This is a product that I'm selling in a lot of other ways. Well, that doesn't win any games. You want $600 million to fix up Cap One Arena? I need a championship team inside it, so people want to go.
Yeah, not $10 tickets for the lower bowl.
Yeah, it's crazy. All right, we're out of here. I'm Rick Snyder.
I'm Matt.
Thanks for coming. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Seasons of Discontent with your hosts, Rick Snyder and Matt Combs.